Hey everyone, welcome to From the Hangar podcast. I'm your host, Lem Malabuyo, and I am here with Isaac and Amber Rogers. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Thanks for having us.
One thing I love about this story, or the aspect of their story that they're going to tell to you guys in a moment, is that they touch on the kind of the spiritual maturity and growth that goes with anyone's life and walk with God. And I really wanted them to talk about that because it happened largely overseas. And it's something that, at MAF, we talk a lot about aviation and even technology and just like all the cool, fun, like type stuff. And we haven't really talked like a deep dive into someone's like spiritual journey. And so you guys have been very open about that, and you have been very, very gracious to come on as guests. So I thank you guys for doing that. So let's dive into that. Why don't you guys maybe introduce yourselves first? I gave you guys your names already, but like give us the what do you call it? The bells and whistles of Isaac and Amber, or something like that.
Wow.
What is that called?
Yeah, I don't know if I have bells and whistles.
Yeah, what's that? The nuts and bolts. Nuts and bolts. That's the more aviation.
Oh, there we go.
Side term. There you go.
Yeah. Yeah, we've been with MAF for 19 years, and I was a pilot mechanic, and we both grew up in Portland, Oregon. We like to spray paint things and burn stuff down, so we enjoy that part. Amber was a teacher for 5 years for Portland Public Schools, and
we actually met when I was in 8th grade.
yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah.
I was a freshman, big freshman in high school.
Yeah.
But,
Okay, so now I gotta touch on that. Like, freshman, 8th grade, like you guys were friends first. How long did it take before you started catching Amber's, or Amber started catching your eye? I would say.
oh well, so we met when I was a freshman. She was 8th grade. Our good friends were friends, so we knew each other, but that was about it.
Yeah.
But my mom worked there, and my mom she really liked Amber. Amber would walk to and from school.
She was trying to set us up kind of from the beginning, but it did take a while.
I was clueless, and I was also a moron.
Yeah.
So
as freshman guys go.
yes, and so basically, just before, like a couple weeks before my senior year, I had failed my driver's license test, and so I had to go to school with my mom. And then Amber was there because she's just an awesome person, and she was volunteering during the summer to work at the school, and she looked good. And I was like, whoa, dang. And so I invited her, of course, to the ice cream social, and she said yes. And then we started hanging out a lot, and then started dating officially. Like,
Amber, how about yourself? Was that the first time you started looking at Isaac like, oh, could be a potential thing? Or
We had actually gone to a couple dances together, and yeah, the secretary at the school had actually warned me away from him initially.
wise words.
But yeah, a couple years later, he had showed up at my door with a rose. It was very sweet, and we started dating my junior year of high school. So.
Yeah.
It was
30 years ago. We're so old. Dude.
Oh man, you didn't have to volunteer that information. You could have kept it to
It
yourself.
feels
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
So
Okay, so then you guys dated like through college, and did you guys get married after graduation, or what was that?
I showed up to my college orientation with an engagement ring on my hand, and
Wow.
I did 1 year in the dorm, and then we bought a little house and got married this summer after my freshman year in college.
Oh man.
yeah, I know.
Wow.
I know. Yeah. The Lord was cool. And we both have younger siblings, and when they turned like 19 and 20, we were like, oh man, what were our parents thinking? But at the time, it just seemed like completely
Seemed right.
natural.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Lord
That's
was cool.
great.
Yeah, no,
And
it
then
was
you said 30 years ago. That's amazing.
yeah.
So have you guys been married for 30 years or
27.
27 years?
Yeah.
Oh man. One day I'll
Yeah.
say the same thing with
Right?
my wife, and that would be an amazing feat. So that's awesome.
That's
That's so
cool.
great. Did you guys was overseas missions something that was always on your mind, or was that something that kind of like developed later down the years in your marriage?
Well, for me, I didn't even know what a missionary was until I was 21. I had them goofed up with mercenaries. which were super different. And
Are they really?
yeah, I mean, I don't know. Well, I
No,
was
they are.
confused
They
because there
are.
was
They are.
this family at church, and they were getting ready to go serve in Nairobi, Kenya, and I was like, man, that's so weird because they are such a sweet family, and they're bringing their kids with them as mercenaries, and I was like, I don't understand what's going on here. So the Lord was super cool, but that's that family, and then another friend of ours who did 2 summers over in Kenya. That's who the Lord really used to light a fire in our heart to want to serve Him overseas.
And we had actually initially looked at me teaching overseas.
Okay.
That was one of the first things that we pursued because it was one of the only things we knew you could do overseas, besides being Bible translators, which we weren't. But the Lord actually closed that door. We were initially really discouraged by that. And then within a pretty short period of time, the Lord led us to MAF, which was pretty amazing because we all of a sudden discovered that there was this, aviation and ministry missions that coexisted. And they did teachers, had brought teachers along as well. So it felt like just the perfect place for us to pursue.
That's awesome. And then, so you were a pilot. Like, was that something you did as a profession then? Before
No,
MAF, or?
I was a carpenter actually.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
yeah. I was a carpenter and worked for a good remodeling company. And when I was 25, though, I have a pretty wonky back, and so my body was already starting to fall apart. And I was like, oh man, I woke up one day and I was like, I should do something different before I'm 40 and I can't even get out of bed, So without looking too much into it at all, I decided to go back to school to become an A&P. And just as a career change to become an aircraft mechanic. And so in 2001, we got interviewed by a school in Nairobi, Kenya. The Lord closed that door, which was super confusing because we had total peace about applying. Then the Lord closed the door. So that was January. In March, I got my pilot's license. That was just a gift from Amber while she was teaching, and just a fulfillment of a childhood dream. But
cool.
I wanted to fly. I never wanted to fly commercially. And then, so that was March. And then in July, I went back to school to become an A&P. And 2 weeks after school started, there was a sign next to the time clock that said Mission Aviation meeting today after school. I had no idea what that was, but I was super interested. And I went, and Ron Hilbrands was there doing a presentation.
I was about to ask who was there.
Yeah. And the Lord was cool. He was just like, oh, this is the way. And so we looked at AIM Air and JARS and stuff like that. But yeah, it was very obvious MAF was to be it. And yeah, it's been awesome. So
That's great.
yeah.
Okay. And then 19 years later, here you are.
Yeah.
So where did you guys serve overseas then?
We were in Indonesia, and we very much did the move again friend thing. We did language school in Bandung, and then 6 months in Sentani, 1.5 years in Wamena, 3 months in Tarakan, a year in Wamena, furlough. So that was our first term, and then came back, did another 1.5 years in Wamena, and then I got very burned out, ended up in the States for 9 months, and then went back to Indonesia, but moved to Tarakan. We thought we were going to be there forever and ever. And the day after Amber put the last picture on the wall, we were asked to go fill in Plangkaraya, the float plane base. We were only supposed to be there for 4 months. We were there for 5 years. And then we thought we were going to move back to the States, but ended up moving back up to Tarakan so that Amber could run the school and be a teacher. And then we thought we were only going to do that for 10 months, one school year, and ended up being there for 3 more years. So
Okay.
yeah,
That's like the airplane montage in a movie that shows
yeah.
the
right, yeah,
all
exactly.
back and forth. So
Right.
there was a lot of relocating in that time span for
Yeah.
you guys. And you guys have 2 children, right? Is that right?
2 boys.
We do, yeah. We left when they were 2 months old and almost 2.
Okay.
And they spent pretty much all of their
Okay.
growing up years
Yeah. Okay.
overseas.
All right. Okay. I think that's that was some really good groundwork that we just laid for the next question, because and Isaac, you mentioned this too, that you burned out at some point in those years that you were there, and that's kind of what I think maybe was the catalyst for maybe some of the spiritual growth that God really used that burnout to really kind of slingshot you and your family into this I can't just say a spiritual walk that maybe you didn't foresee in your own Christian walk. So I kind of want I kind of wanted to ask you, maybe talk into that, and maybe start at like where things started to get a little bit out of hand for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, so like where we serve is hard. Like MAF serves in hard places, with beautiful, amazing people, but like life is hard, and human nature is a bummer sometimes. And yeah, we have an enemy that's very busy in trying to wreck things that are good. Yeah. So in Papua, I like specifically with us in Wamena, I went from like being like the baby new pilot to like one of the most senior pilots over I think 6 months after we got back from furlough. Like it happened very quick. Like we had a lot of moves even when we were on furlough.
Yeah.
And then we got back and some other folks moved. And so all of a sudden we had like 5 airplanes and 6 pilots down to like me and maybe one other pilot, and trying to serve 86 villages and feeling the pressure of needing to like serve. And if I don't, then people are going to die.
Yeah.
And then, Wamena, there's a lot of things that happen and a lot of tension. And there was a lot of aircraft accidents, non-MAF aircraft accidents that were happening in Papua. And so there was just a lot of different factors that played into like what I would say would be stress. Yeah.
Okay.
Just to like lump that into one thing. And I wasn't processing any of it. I didn't know that I should, and I didn't know how to. And I think that if I was like Superman, it'd be fine. I could just sally forth and do well. But I'm just me. I'm just pretty average. And so like that cumulative effect of like kind of traumatic, I mean, a wide range of traumatic things happening, death and the threat of war I actually noticed it first in my body. I started this like slow falling apart. I remember the only time I've ever really been frustrated with the Lord is I had been like low grade sick for so long. And I was like, Lord, why don't you just make me feel better? Like I'm sick, but I'm like just good enough that I can fly. It's fine.
Yeah.
But I would still be sick, or like my sinuses would be plugged up and it would take me forever to descend because I think like my molars are going to explode. So, then that was my body being like, hey, there's problems here.
Yeah.
We need to change something here. We need to do something. And I didn't catch on at all. And so finally, like really the last 2 weeks, I just was falling apart, and I kept hearing myself, say, there's something wrong with me. Like there's something wrong with me. And I had malaria 2 different times, and it kind of felt like that, but it didn't have the same symptoms. And I was just falling apart, and I just felt so hollow. And so, really my last flight, first flight of the morning, landed at Angruk, and I had been there a bunch, nailed the landing. And I got stopped, and I was just shaking, and I was like, oh, something's wrong with me. And then I kind of like realized, dude, I've been saying something's wrong with me for a while now, and I'm going to have an accident, because you just can't mess around.
Right.
And, so I still like loaded everybody up, and I flew home to Wamena. But when I got home, I called our chief pilot, and it was like, something's wrong with me. I don't know what's going on, but I'm realizing I'm going to have an accident probably if I keep going. And then our chief maintenance was awesome, and he wrote an email right away and was like, hey, thank you. You're off maintenance too. And that was about 2 weeks before we went back to the States for furlough.
Okay.
For a short furlough for my sister's wedding.
Yeah.
I was just shot. I was just physically empty.
Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah.
And so what year would that have been?
That was 2011 and 2011.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so when you informed your boss and like the higher ups about this, like what was they took you off maintenance, they took you off flight operations and everything. Like did they offer you like an extended furlough, or like what was the next steps for them or for you, I guess, with MAF?
Yeah, that got a little complicated, but and we didn't know even all the details. Basically, we had bought round trip tickets to go to the States, and we got to the States. we were kind of handed over to New Heights Church, which was New Heights has been a longtime partner of MAF Papua, and we live in the Portland area, real close to New Heights. So we didn't like go to New Heights and stay there. We just lived with Amber's parents, and but yeah, MAF was awesome actually because right away our regional director, he was like, well, let's not make your return date for sure, which was a shock, but it was also very helpful because there wasn't any pressure to like get better, because I wasn't getting better. Like it wasn't like, oh, I'll just take 2 weeks off and then I'll feel like a human again. Like I was not getting better. And I knew I was like broken and messed up, but I didn't know what was going on. So it was pretty depressing and pretty weird. So we ended up back in the States, and so it just ended up total being 9 months. And in that 9 months, the Lord was very fascinating, because the Lord didn't talk about stress at all for like 5 years. Like the number one question he asked right off the bat was like, where do you get your value? And I was like, oh, I don't know. And then as I started digging into it, realized, oh man, I'm getting my value from my performance and other people's opinion. And as a dad, as a husband, as a missionary, as a pilot and mechanic, American, I was very average and not doing great, and trying to get my value from my performance and other people's opinions in all of these areas of life. And it was exhausting. And so that year was awful. It was terrible. And I would totally do it again. because what I got to learn was that like our value only ever always comes from what the Lord thinks of us.
Yeah.
And like, praise God, he's crazy about us. He's nuts about us. He's crazy about us. And so once we can actually really realize that, then our value is set, and that he won't love us more or less. Like our value in his eyes is set. And that's total freedom, because now we're freed up just to be a human. We can fail and we can succeed, and it's fine. Like if we fail, totally fine. Our value is still set. Like totally acceptable, totally accepted by the Lord. Dang. And freedom is delicious. Total freedom. And freedom is delicious. Yeah. That's why I would do that year again. It was awful. Like I didn't care if I ever flew again. I thought MIF was going to fire us because I was like a mess.
Yeah.
and taking off old bandages and going and having the Holy Spirit go and mend old wounds, and going and like demolishing foundational belief systems. You're like, dude, it's exhausting. You know, it's really hard.
Yeah.
And it's so worth it. It's so worth it.
It's a painful process. I mean, it's a lot of work, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's like, like you said, it's freedom.
Yeah.
It tastes good.
Yes.
You know? Man, Amber, I mean, do you mind me asking, like, you know, how were you and the kids during this time too? Like what was God working in your guys' lives during that year?
You know, during that year, a lot of it was just survival for us. Like, you know, Isaac and I were talking about it earlier. I was a single parent in a lot of ways that year. I got to live with family, and had a lot of, at that time, all of our family lived in the Portland area. So, you know, we just focused on having fun, and they were not even old enough really to do homeschool. No, we were doing homeschooling that year. So it was just kind of maintaining. It really wasn't until we returned to the States, when we returned to overseas later, that the Lord gave me opportunity to kind of unpack, you know, and I think for a lot of moms, that's what it is. You know, you're just trying to keep going. So when we got back to Indonesia, we actually asked for a program change. So we switched to Kalimantan. And like Isaac said earlier, we were there in Tarakan just for a few months, and then we're asked to do a temporary fill-in in Pelangkaraya. And there met really good friends, people who became really good friends. And there was a women's conference that was just for women serving overseas. And it was only 3 days, but it was like the Lord just gave me space to unpack everything that had happened that in the year previous. And I got connected with a woman who is a spiritual director. She became my mentor, and we continue to meet. It's been about 12 years now of meeting about every 6 weeks or so. And so those were the supports that came, after the fact. And the Lord brought a lot of healing. Just with opportunities to return to Papua. I just got to go back last fall. That moving again friend comes with a lot of losses, but the Lord has redeemed them, those situations in so many ways. So, and like Isaac said, the lessons he learned has been good for our family, but it was a really hard year.
Yeah. And so, like you guys said, like you guys did go back overseas, and you went to Kalimantan. Isaac, for you, did some of the challenges and the issues that you had in Papua, like, did those things start to creep in again once you got to Kalimantan, or was it like, this is actually great, like what I've learned in the States, like I can really take that with me, and that's validating enough for me to be, a pilot mechanic?
No, it's a good question. And what was kind of fun was, like, I was working hard on it, and like I had realized that like even at the end of that 9 months, I got my multi-engine, and as I started flight training at this little airstrip by her parents' house, I could start to identify like the lies that I had believed and lived for so long, and I could see them in myself, and then I could catch it. I could go, oh, I'm doing it again. Like, I'm people pleasing, or I'm doing this, right? Like, I'm really looking for value from my performance and what my instructor thinks of me, And so I could catch myself and go, okay, there we go. Truth is, like, the Lord loves me, and I have value in him. So it's flying this airplane is just like, now just fly the airplane, right? And it was good, and I was learning how to do it, and it was awesome. Then I went to like my parents' house, and I fell right back into old self, right?
Yeah.
And then I realized, like, oh man, so every slice of life, every realm of life, that truth has to be applied. And so identifying lies and replacing it with God's truth, God's perspective of who we are from his perspective. So moving back was good, because again, I kind of kept that same like mindset of like, okay, just identifying those areas and those thoughts, and then replacing it with truth. And it was nice. It was good. It was, it's neuroplasticity. So like, it just takes time to rebuild or to build new neural pathways, to make like a bridge, if you will. It goes, starts out as like a 2x4, and you add more lumber to it, and then eventually you get some steel, and eventually you get some concrete and rebar, and that thought becomes much easier, much more commonplace, that like, oh man, I messed up. Oh, it's all right. Like, because I am totally accepted by and loved by the Lord. So that becomes the base foundational thought, instead of I'm garbage, I'm terrible. So
well, it's really cool to hear you guys both talk kind of like during that, like what life was like for you, both of you, during that season, because it sounded like, oh man, Isaac's going through some really tough things, and Amber, I think you said like it was kind of like survival mode for you and the children at that point, like, right? And
she was amazing. She really was like a single mom, because I wasn't doing anything, and she was awesome.
And it's great because she was there to support you, right? And, and it wasn't until you guys went back overseas, and then it was, you were feeling a lot better. You can probably do a lot more of the support mode, and Amber now can do some of the processing and unpacking, and you can be there for the family. And that's just really neat, because when you look back on that, God was really helping you both, but doing it, at different times, so that you both benefit. But it takes a long time, and sometimes you just can't see like over the horizon. It's like, oh, this is so hard. God, what are you doing? And then you look back and think, okay, God did really know what was best for our family.
100%.
So that was awesome. There was an example, Isaac, that you talk about, that was a great picture of kind of like how God sees us, right? And it was during this time that you talk about in previous conversations, that you've been trying to develop like a really intentional pursuit in God's presence in your everyday life, and really trying to invite him into everything that you do. And you were at home in the kitchen, and so I kind of wanted you like to tell this story because I think it was just really beautiful.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's like it's one of those things that when it happened, I was like, dude, I'm never gonna tell anybody this because this is crazy.
And also like just for time frame, was this like not time frame but like placement on the timeline? Was this in Palangkaraya?
No,
or was this...
so when we thought we were gonna move back to the States, actually Amber really felt like she had this vision for what the school in Tarakan could be.
Yeah,
and so she talked to her program manager and she had this idea and the program manager was totally for it. Like, come back up here, help teach, help run the school.
Yeah. And I'm gonna pick Amber's brain on that too. So I kind of like I got the timeline a little wrong, but since we talked about that thing, like your thing, let's have your like I really do want you to tell about that. So maybe like talk about that, and then I can like I really want like
okay,
I'm gonna talk to Amber about it,
so we ended up back in Tarakan, and I was a full-time stay-at-home dad and a part-time pilot. And again, even just in my own story, I'm so thankful that the Lord went after my value before I had this time in Tarakan. Because if it had been like the other way around or something, I mean, I for sure would have struggled being this like stay-at-home dad and a part-time pilot. I would have been like, oh, dude, I don't know. This is not good, and I would have really struggled with it. Initially, I had days where I was like, okay, this is not cool because I don't know what I'm doing. Amber's professional. There's just so much work to do, especially overseas when so much is done by scratch and it's just hard, electricity and all that. But what was awesome is I had this time that I've never had before. So Amber and the boys would go to school and I was home alone and there was stuff to do, but I could just like lock the front door and just hang out with the Lord. And I'd invite him to hang out and he would. And
what does that look like? I guess I mean your story does tell that, but like what is that? This like real quick, like what is that? Invite God to hang out. Like, how does that even happen?
Right.
Like, what do you do?
Okay, so in a nutshell, in a very small nutshell, I would say our imagination is a gift from the Lord, and I think our imagination is this beautiful meld between our brain and our heart. And it's a gift from the Lord. I always thought I had to put my imagination in a headlock, punch it in the face, because evil only ever happens there. And I realized that actually our imagination is sacred and holy, and it's a gift from the Lord. And when we put our imagination on the table, turn some lights on, bring the Lord into it, and actually meet him there, then a lot of that evil that wants to just have free reign in our imagination actually doesn't get that license anymore just to like run free. So that's the very short version of it. So
okay, that's really cool.
God
I love it. I love it.
God is omnipresent, but we often don't live like it. Yeah. So to say that like the Lord Jesus is sitting right next to me is like
that can make sense.
Actual reality. You know, like it's actual reality. And when you it's like practicing the presence of God. Yeah. So Tozer talks about it, and Brother Lawrence and these folks that like put their mind to realizing that the Lord is present and then interacting with the Lord like he is. So, so like I would invite Jesus to hang out with me in the kitchen while I was like cutting onions or whatever. Right. And he would, and it was awesome. And so we would have like dialogue. And that's the thing, like realizing too, that prayer is not just like, thanks Lord for lunch, bless me this, bless, this, amen. But it's like dialogue, actually having enough space, making enough time and patience and allowing the Lord to speak and actually listening.
Yeah.
And then actually being obedient when he actually asks us for, to do things or whatever.
Yeah.
So it was cool because I was just getting to practice this like time, this deep time with the Lord, and he would come and it was awesome. So to go back to like what you're referring to, so one day I was in the kitchen and I was making French bread, and it's anyone can do it. It's not hard. And I'm like kneading this dough, and I hadn't flown for a couple weeks and I can't remember why, but, and I had invited Jesus to come hang out with me. He was standing right next to me, and I'm like in the kitchen kneading bread, and I'm like, I haven't done anything like big for you in a while. And I was kind of being a dork, but I was like, but I'm making French bread. Would you like some? And he very clearly said yes. Like, absolutely. And the way he said it was like, the best way I could describe it would be like, if I was like, it was like a king accepting like gold and wealth from an emissary. Like he was accepting this goofy bit of French bread that I was making like a gift of gold. And dude, I just bawled. Like it was crazy.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay. I mean, this simple thing had like such high value for him. Yeah. So like the next week after that, I had a busy flight schedule. I was scheduled for 6 flights. I ended up doing 9. I had a medevac, and I was like praying that this poor old man could make it from the village to the city that I was taking him to so he could go to the hospital. It was a 30-minute flight, and I was like, Lord, please let him get to the hospital and heal him. Yeah. And but anyway, but it was a very missionary pilot day. It was awesome. Like, I mean, I added flights, and it was fighting weather, and I love adding flights. I mean, people are already so grateful anyway when you just do the scheduled flights. But then when they're like, hey, we have a bunch of people that actually need to get over there, and then they have people that need to get here, like, would you? And I'm like, oh yeah, no problem. And then the medevac, and it was awesome. It was a great day. Well, I'm flying home, and I happen to be empty on the way home. And I'm flying home, and about 15 minutes out of Tarakan, I was like, oh man. And again, I'm like, Lord, have a seat. And I'm like, and by the way, like all of this today was for you. And he said, yes. Thank you. And he received it in the same exact way with the same type of honor as when I was at home by myself making a loaf of bread. And oh man, I'm bawling, trying to talk to ATC. Like, oh man, I was a mess. But like just overwhelmed with joy and like and even honor, like that the Lord would consider. I don't know, to me, like the Lord will consider anything a gift that we offer him. Yeah. So now if I'm in my cubicle doing a spreadsheet, like I can be like, Lord, this is for you. And he's like, yes. It's mind blowing. So even when I hear moms and they're like, oh, I'm just a mom. I'm like, whoa, time out. No way, man. That's high level.
Did you tell Amber about this story how pretty soon after it happened, or like?
No, I didn't really tell anybody for a while. But it was such an amazing thing. Yeah, I don't know who I told. And then I ended up telling it at chapel. Yeah. Because the Lord was like, yeah, you need to tell that story. And I was like, oh.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, Amber, that story, like, how does that resonate with you? Or does,
Yeah, I think, in a lot of ways, I think about our time with MAF and the seasons that we've had. And especially as the accompanying spouse that doesn't have a designated role, we've just really seen how the Lord has used every season in our lives. And so whether it's been the taking care of the kids and the house and everything, and inviting nationals in to be with us, or getting to be the one, when I took the role teaching there in Tarakan for the 3 years leading that, I felt like all of the gifting and skills that God had equipped me with, I was getting to use in a different way. But there's been a time and a place for each. Right. This past year, so we've now transitioned to being at headquarters. We did that in 2020, and we really never wanted to work at headquarters, but when we were offered positions in member care, doing things that we were really that I was passionate about, doing education support and supporting our third culture kids, was a huge gift. And then, there were just a lot of surprises along the way. This last year, because of my dad's deteriorating health, we actually had to say no to a lot of ministry opportunities that we would have jumped at in the past. Short-term assignments back overseas, different things. But we really felt like God was asking us to be faithful in caring for my parents. And the Lord has just brought some beautiful stories out of that. And so we're just really thankful that he's shown us both how important it is just to be faithful in whatever season he's calling us to, whatever obedience looks like in that season.
Amen. Yeah. Oh man, that's so good. I mean, I love you guys. Thanks, Amber, is it okay if I rewind a little bit? Because I think that your passion for education is something to really like emphasize when, especially in like this, it's at least to me, I feel like maybe correct me if I'm wrong, or someone can comment and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's pretty unconventional to have like a kind of like a role swap, or I guess a prioritizing of roles swap, where Isaac, like Amber came to you, right? And then like you were like, hey, I have this like a vision for the school in Tarakan, right? Like, do you want to tell this story? Maybe Amber, I should ask you to tell the story, not me. Tell the story.
Well, I usually let Isaac tell it, but yeah, as we were actually thinking we were going to be heading to the States, I had a meeting with our program director and said, you know, I have a few thoughts on the school I'd love to share with you, because I just really think it needs a little more direction there. And I said, I would love to come and implement my vision for it, but I don't think you'll get my husband on board. And so the next day we were actually getting up early in the morning and walking together every morning. And I told him what I had told the program director the day before. And that's where
so she tells me this idea, like, we could go up to Tarakan, and like you could fly and I could work and you could be at home a little bit and stuff. And I was like, great husband response. I was like, dude, that's the worst idea I've ever heard. And like as soon as I said that, the Lord gave me this time lapse photography of like the previous 15 years, where we were, all the way back to where she was teaching for Portland Public Schools, and we were living on her income while I went back to school to get all my stuff,
Okay, yeah.
And then all the other years, and then at the end of it said supporter. And I was like, whoa, yes, sir. But on the outside, I was like, oh, yeah, maybe we could figure something out, see what we could do. So, yeah, no, I very much knew. I was like, oh, we should go do that. So,
yeah, so it was a great culmination of, the teaching I had done for Portland Public Schools, the
7 years of
homeschooling I had been doing, and then to be able to come around and support our mission community there, and kind of strengthening that school, which then really led into the roles that we have now. It was during that time that I had been reflecting on how important it had been for me as a homeschool parent to have somebody who was coming and doing testing with my kids every year, who was coming and giving me feedback on how we were doing. And I had thought, I really think MAF needs to have a role like that. At the same time, others were coming to MAF and approaching them with the same idea. So when we got to step into that role here, it was really exciting just to see. I love that mission organizations are starting to catch a vision for that whole care, and for the education support in particular.
And it's so cool to hear you guys talk about how God has kind of like guided you through your lives, and and the whole like a little like wrap up, like highlight reel thing going in your head, and like at the end saying like, no, it's your turn to support her through something that I want her to do, but like because of that, like Amber, you're saying like member care, like coming here and doing your roles in member care now, like that led to that. The French bread story wouldn't have happened if you weren't home, right?
No, totally.
And I didn't even know about the whole like I think the 9 flights you did the following week. And how impactful God's yes to you in that was, because like he had taught you that everything you present to him is incredibly valuable to him.
Absolutely.
And so like I think it's just this really cool like orchestration of his guidance and sovereignty, really, to just like lift you guys up closer to him, and be a real impact in the lives that are around you, and the things that you guys do and specialize in. Praise God for that.
No, he's so good. I mean, and for me, like our last 3 years in Tarakan was beautiful preparation for what I'm doing now. And it took me like a year. I was here like a year before I realized like, oh, so much of what happened in those 3 years, because even up until that point, our focus was really the Indonesian people. So whether that's at the restaurant or the lady that I buy gas from intentionally or whatever, our focus was on the Indonesian people. But when we moved back to Tarakan, we didn't even like plan it, but naturally our focus really became our Western team. And that was new for us, but it just naturally happened. And so I was even helping out at the school a little bit, and I was hanging out with the kids way much more. And just, again, had more time to be obedient and listen to the Lord and be sensitive. And again, for me, I mean, for Amber, it's always been education, and she's very gifted at it, and she's amazing at it. She was an awesome homeschool mom. Man, she did so good. And but for me, like, I needed that kind of preparation to even do what I'm doing now. So yeah, the Lord is just, he totally knows what he's doing, and he's so good, man. He's so awesome.
Yeah. Amen. He is incredible. You serve a good God.
We do.
Okay. So you guys have been touching a little bit on your roles now here at headquarters with the member care department or division. I guess it's division. Amber, can you like maybe talk about like your role with member care?
Yeah, so I now do member care for our kids 4 years and to about 10, 11. And then Isaac does the member care for our kids 11 and on. So some of that means pre-field planning. We're actually getting ready in May to do orientation class. So we actually have classes for the kids so that they can learn what it's like to go overseas and what kind of things they need to be preparing for and how to deal with stress, how to recognize their emotions. So we do pre-field classes. We do field visits and do those same kind of lessons overseas with our kids, which is just a wonderful opportunity. To continue to grow with the kids. I also get to do the homeschool support, but not just homeschool support, whether families, are using international school or national school, when they're considering bilingual education, all of those kind of things. We get to have just a lot of great conversations, whether it's choosing curriculum or trying to plan ahead for university and what that transition is going to look like for their kids. So
that's great. That's awesome. Yeah, and I think that's something I really admire about MAF as an organization. Like children can, like, the temptation there or the oversight there is like children can be kind of an afterthought in the whole process. And even overseas, like they're, like the adults have their ministry and the children are there present because they're children of families. But with member care, it's very much like, no, like you guys are a part of this, and we should definitely prepare you in a healthy way what that's going to look like overseas. You guys are important. And so
I just got to meet with a wife today who's actually, her husband's here doing technical evaluation, and to start those conversations and start thinking through, what is this going to look like for your kids to live overseas. I'm so thankful that MAF has caught that vision.
It's awesome. It's great. I think it's just a very cool, I don't know if it's necessarily a unique thing about MAF, but it's something that I definitely like hone in on when it comes to MAF's organization. It's like member care, and then like the member care of children too. So which is why I also really enjoy hanging out with Isaac too, because that's the older kids, and that's when I became a missionary kid, was when I was 12, and so like I think maybe that's why it resonates a lot with me. Is like that age group from like 11 to 18 or so.
But no, I appreciate. I mean, and exactly. I mean, like moving back to the States and being on a furlough or being overseas. I mean, all of those different places, and like, the teenage years are the preteen and teen years are just so hard anyway. And then you add all the complexities of missional life, and it's beautiful and it's hard, and it is a joy to be able to work with our kids and then our and parents. Our desire is to be a support for parents and a support for kids. And even with debriefs that we do and pre-field orientation we do, we're hoping that like the whole family has shared vocabulary now. So they can talk about stuff. So if you talk about like the transition bridge or the grief cycle or whatever, people have the vocabulary and some concepts to put things on.
That, I mean, and the debrief thing, I was going to bring that up too. I think that doing that hard work and unpacking things and finding things that you may not have realized were, I don't know what you call it, like little traumas or tiny traumas. I don't know what the book says.
Little T traumas.
Little T traumas. Like those can stack up and be an issue. And I think building awareness with in adults as well as children is really, I think it's just really neat. And like listening to you guys' story and like the journey you guys have been on and doing the work to unpack your own lives really prepared you guys to be in the role you are in now to help guide others to do the same. So just so cool. I just love like this is mind blowing. It's just mind blowing.
Cool, isn't he? So awesome, man. Lord's awesome.
Well, before we like wrap things up, I did want to ask you guys, like, for people who follow Jesus, Christians, who struggle with that same idea of like, I don't have anything of value to bring to the mission field, or even just bring to God in their everyday life. What would you guys say to them?
It's not true. Because I think it's a lie that Satan kind of feeds us, yeah. And I think it even is attached to kind of our cultural ranking of people, if you will.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, like the doctor has high value, high status, and the janitor has low value and low status. And in the Lord's eyes, the creator, our creator, the potter, if you will, like, he's crazy about us. And again, everything we can offer. I mean, he sees this widow put 2 little pennies in, and he's like, she's given more than everybody else.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's the beauty of our King. He is so humble and so gracious and so kind. Really simple obedience and simple faith, and then the desire to know him for who he is. And I think that's where it starts. I feel like it took me 12 of our 14 years overseas to really figure out, like, oh man, if I make the pursuit of the person of Jesus, the person of the Holy Spirit, and the person of the Father the number one priority, everything else will come after that, and everything will come out of that. Yeah, and I don't want that to be cliche. Because it's not, well, yeah, duh, that's what we say, but no, but like for real, because we often, like, I could burn myself out serving God, and not walking with the Spirit at the same time. Totally dumb. And it's bizarre. So when I really focus on like getting to know the Lord God because of who he is, then everything else will be in the right place.
And like truly believe those truths, right? I think it's like just really take it to heart,
right? So, and practice it. Practice it daily.
And I think ministry is everywhere. Like there's just ministry in simple obedience. To see my mom caring for my dad this last year, and she was sharing with the caretakers that were coming into her house, and the number of people that were commenting on the peace that they could sense in her home there. And actually, one of the respite caregivers came to church with us on Easter Sunday and accepted the Lord. Like, there's just ministry in everything. And so I think that to me is, just walking in obedience, whether it's a simple, whatever he asks us to do.
Very cool. Wise words. Thanks, you guys. Appreciate it. I do want to do like the rapid fire question thing. I do want to do that.
Let's do it.
So, okay.
Let's do it.
This has been some pretty heavy things. So I'm just going to start off like favorite movies.
Ooh, Penguins in Madagascar.
Both of those? Which one is higher than the other?
The first one.
The first Penguins in Madagascar. I thought you were talking about the Penguins movie. Isn't there like a Penguins movie?
No, Penguins in Madagascar movie.
Oh, it's okay.
Yeah.
Animated. Did this just come out recently?
No, it's a little bit ago.
Oh man, I see.
All the best movies are animated.
Yeah. I feel like I'm living in a little bit of a black hole when it comes to movies coming out in recent years.
Yeah.
So just because I have young kids, so I don't really watch movies.
We are stuck a few years ago.
Yeah.
We actually prefer animated movies mostly. So,
okay, really?
I'd pick Robots. Yeah, which was also an animated
Wait, which
movie.
one is that called?
Robots. It's animated.
Oh, it's before your time, bro.
Yeah, I know. You got to go back old school.
Oh, man.
Oh.
Secret Life of Walter Mitty.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Someone dropped that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
That's a good one.
And someone told me, like, you should definitely watch that movie as a photographer. Lem. I'm like, what are you doing? How have you not watched that movie? And I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well, can I ask you, like, why animated movies? Why is that something you guys really gravitate towards?
I love art. Yeah, I think art has just been a part of, like, I wanted to be a cartoonist as a child. And I don't know. I find it fascinating.
Yeah.
I think cartoons are fun. It's just awesome.
Yeah, I love that. Like, I would think I think I was saying this before we started filming, but like what I love about you two is that like we can get like real deep into like God and life and everything. And then it's like, what kind of movies do you like? I like cartoons because they're fun. It's so great. Oh man, so it's like you can go real deep and you can get like
Amen,
and just
dude.
like, get to the surface and just have, splash around a little bit. And
Yeah,
then get back down. So it's cool. I
Got
just
it.
love it. Okay. One last question. Like, what are some like hobbies you guys like to do?
I really am good friends with food. I try to diet, but it's like leaving friends, and like I don't want to be a jerk.
Yeah,
Like I don't
no.
want to be rude.
Right.
And not eat onion rings, and so
Yeah, those onion rings have a lot to offer, a lot of joy to offer.
the soul is really
Yeah.
complete.
Why would you deprive them of blessing your life?
Man, and all of my chins really agree, and so that's tough. But yeah, no, cooking and eating and traveling and snorkeling and scuba diving and flying and music.
Well, what's going to happen is after this episode airs, like you're going to have to like make French bread for the entire office, so they can all.
He has a really good crusty bread recipe that's super
it's
easy.
so easy.
He'll share that instead.
Yeah.
Okay.
Teach
I should
them
have asked you to
fish.
make that so we can like partake of it
Partake.
during the
Oh,
podcast.
man.
Oh,
With a good curry. Oh, and some naan. Oh man.
you missed. I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry you didn't get to watch us eat food while listening.
So hungry.
Because that translates so well on microphones too. The people just eating.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Just long moments of silence whilst chewing.
How about yourself, Amber? What you like to do on your free time?
It really depends on the season. I like being outside and gardening when it's
Yes.
beautiful like this.
Oh man.
In the winter, I hunker down with books, or I've recently taken up crocheting. So
Okay.
yeah.
Well, what would we find in your garden this upcoming season? Like we're entering spring. We're pretty much in spring now.
Yeah, we have a beautiful climbing rose that, probably in May is going to be at its peak. So, yeah, I love mostly flower gardening. I
Okay,
haven't gotten into vegetables
Okay.
here in Idaho yet, but yeah.
What is a climbing rose? Is that just like a vine that just goes up a wall?
Sort
or-
of, yeah, it goes along our fence.
Okay.
and-
Like Italy when you see like some rose bush that's stuck on the side of a wall.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that.
Oh.
No,
Yeah,
it's
it doesn't
super
last
cool.
very long, but it's amazing.
But it's amazing when it
Yeah.
happens. Oh man, that's so great.
Yeah, it's cool.
Very cool. Well, that's kind of what I wanted to talk to you guys about.
Awesome.
I don't know if there's anything else you guys wanted to share or anything. Oh, actually, there was a book that came to my mind when you guys were talking, and it's With
Oh
by
yeah.
Sky
Jitani.
Jitani.
Yeah.
And I love that book. And I think I might have asked Member Care for a copy, and that's the copy I ended up having and reading for the first time in 2020 when COVID happened.
Oh, awesome.
And it was a mind-blowing book that kind of like changed the way I kind of like see God.
Yes.
And so
Yeah.
I think I was going through some of this like same like presence of God stuff
Awesome.
when you came in 2019 to do your chapel. And so then it was like,
Oh, okay.
yeah. So
Yeah.
God was working in me. Like he just
Man.
transferred all the lessons he had taught you and was like, hey, Lem, you need to learn these too.
Oh, that's awesome. Dude, the Pursuit of God by Tozer.
Yeah. I
That's,
need to read that.
It's meat, man. Like sometimes you read a chapter in a book and then you got to stew on it for a little bit.
Yeah.
Tozer is like you read a paragraph and you kind of gotta, but it's so good. And so like the Lord gave me like 3 books: Pursuit of God by Tozer. Frank Laubach wrote a book, Modern Day Mystic, which is a weird title, but his goal was to think about God at least once every minute he was awake.
Oh, okay.
Missionary in 1930s in the Philippines. And he was like trying to think about God every minute that I'm awake is the hardest thing I've ever done. But he had these amazing highs and amazing lows. And he's like, if heaven is being with God, I'm getting heaven on earth now, because he's like in the presence of God.
Yeah.
Super awesome. And then Brother Lawrence, The Practice of the Presence of God, I think by Brother Lawrence.
Okay.
Dude was a dishwasher, like some monk or something somewhere, and like hung out with the Lord. And it's a book. It's almost like other people's observations of Brother Lawrence. It's really a fascinating little book.
Interesting.
But those 3 books together, like the Lord just kind of like boom, boom, boom. I don't know, orchestrated that. It was awesome.
Oh man. Well, see, now I gotta give Amber the floor about her books.
Oh yeah.
She likes.
I do like reading. Yeah, when we were in Plancaraya after that really difficult season, I read a book by Max Lucado called You'll Get Through This. And it was a story of the life of Joseph, which was really impactful. At the time, we had done it as a small group with the ladies that were living in that area. Yeah, and there's another one. I like historical biographies. It's Evidence Not Seen, and it's Darlene Diebler Rose, I think. She was a prisoner of war in Indonesia during the Second World War, and it's pretty amazing.
Okay. I'm getting too many book recommendations.
Yeah, I know. I have stacks of books next to my bed.
I read so slow.
I'm
like,
super slow.
Would you in a train and would you in the rain? And that takes me so long to get through that.
Yeah, like your description. Oh shoot, your description of Tozer's book. Like, I'll get back to you in 20 years.
Yeah,
like, oh,
yeah.
I started that back in 2024. I finally finished it.
Totally worth it.
Oh man. Well, everyone, thanks so much for tuning in and listening and watching. If you have any comments or feedback you would love to share, I encourage you to do that in the comment section here on the video, or you can email us at podcast@maf.org. And you can watch other episodes if you want on maf.org/podcast. Rogers, thanks so much.
Yeah,
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it.
It's been great.
It was fun.
And I got just under the 1 hour limit that I told you guys. So thanks for staying a little longer. And I do thank you, audience, for doing that as well. So until next time, we'll see you guys.